Please welcome writer, director, Sean Baker. That's my dog.
Oh, that's your dog. Hi, everybody.
Welcome back, Sean. One of my favorite directors is in the house.
That's nice.
Thanks for being here again.
Thank you for having us.
Right off the bat, I want to talk to you about the look of the film, the fact that you shot it in 60 millimeter and the anamorphic lenses. It looks stunning. Can you talk about how you arrived at the look of the film?
Sure. Thank you very much, because I'm so happy with what Drew Daniels did. Drew Daniels is the cinematographer on this film, and we hadn't worked together before, but I had loved his work on the Trey Schultz's films, the last one being Waves, and I knew that he had lived some of his life in Texas, so had that Texan lens, and I said I wanted to shoot on film, because right now I'm kind of dedicated to shooting on film, and we talked about 16, and we found these anamorphic lenses that hadn't been used on a feature before. There have been widescreen 16 millimeter films, but they've used 35 millimeter lenses, and you have to crop on the right and left to get the proper aspect ratio. But these were designed for Super 16, and I really believe it really captures the look we were going for, that early 70s. We looked at Sugarland Express, shot by Vilmos Zsigmond. It was Spielberg's film that he made before Jaws, and they shot in the same area, and we really loved the way that they captured the vistas and just that whole area. And we feel that this anamorphic format really captured a similar thing. And plus, being 16, we could just move very fast, and we were very small. And Drew was faster on 16 than I've seen most DPs be on digital. So yeah.
Yeah, I love the way that you capture Texas, that I almost feel the sweat on the screen and the colors. Why did you choose Texas City?
Well, yeah, Texas City, we discovered it during our very sped up development pre-production stage, where one of my producers, Alex Coco, and we drove to Texas in, I believe, late June of 2020, when we decided to make this film. And we drove to Corpus Christi and fell in love with that refinery town, but we wanted to do our due diligence, so we drove north, hitting every refinery town on the Gulf Coast, and drove into Texas City, and the first thing I saw was this water tower that said, "Texas City, the all-American city." The shot doesn't even make it into the film, but it was speaking to me on many levels, and then it is one of the largest refinery cities in the United States, so you are surrounded, and you can just you spin the camera in any direction, and get an incredible landscape. And with this twisted metal, and the steam and flare stacks with the flames, it was just you feel like you're on a refinery planet in a way. But then we started getting to know the area, meeting people there, reading up on the area, and realizing there's a very sad and dark history about the area. I mean, there was an explosion in 1947, one of the largest industrial explosions in the United States, that killed 581 people. It was the first time that there was a class action suit against the government in the United States. In the 80s, there was a chemical spill that affected many people. Next door in Galveston, you have, of course, the 1900 hurricane that killed over 12,000 people. You have the history of Juneteenth. You have the Texas killing fields between the two cities. You have the slave trade ports in San Leon. So the whole area felt like there was this dark history that was maybe a dark cloud over the entire area. And it was complementing, in a way, I felt it was complementing our tackling of the theme of history, the history between Lexi and Mikey, and the history that Mikey has with these individuals. And so yeah, and other reasons that I would like to have kept up for interpretation, but yeah, we just fell in love with that area, and the people there too were extremely open and welcoming and warm, and Brenda Dice, who plays Lil in the film. We met her in Texas City, and she's a survivor. She's been through it. She was affected by the chemical spill in the 80s, and she brought so much of her own insight to this, and then also was just an incredible person to work with. She bonded
plays
with
the
Bree.
mother in the film.
Lil, and she bonded with Bree, and they became like a mother-daughter team on set. It was great. Yeah.
You do have a history of casting people that have never acted in film before. You used the example of Brenda. What was that? What was it about her when you met her that said, she's my lead here, and I'm going to take a chance with her?
Yeah, every single person besides our three leads were found in a way, well, even Susie was found in a very interesting way, but the first timers were all found in a very happy accident, serendipity sort of way, where, with Brenda, there are porta potties all around the refineries. So I went and used one, I stepped out, and she's in my face. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. And she goes, yeah, is that your car over there? And I'm like, yeah, I thought she was going to reprimand me for parking in the wrong area. And she goes, I need a jump right now. I need you to jump my car. I need to get to my sister's place. So I just ran and got my producer and DP. I'm like, can you help me jump her car? Because I think we found Lil, but you got to jump her car right now. So we pitched her this over that course of jumping her car, and she was great, and we bonded, and next thing you know, we're rehearsing with her. Yeah, so... Yeah.
You also develop a reputation of casting people through Instagram. So who are the people that you found?
In this case, actually, it was Susie, who we met at the ArcLight Hollywood. She was in the lobby.
Plays Strawberry.
Plays Strawberry in the film. This was 2 years before we shot. My wife and I, Samantha Kwan, who's in the audience, she's one of the producers on the film. We were in the lobby. We saw her walking in the glass doors, and we both were like, oh my gosh, there's something about her. There's something. She has that it quality, that aura, that she's going to be a star if she's not already one. So let's go and talk with her. And we did our spiel. We're independent filmmakers. We made this film called Florida Project. We don't have anything right now, but could we please just, exchange information and keep in touch? When we went home that night, we realized she already had an Instagram presence, and she was already an aspiring actor. She had come to Hollywood to do this from the Pacific Northwest. So that's as close to an Instagram story that I have on this film. It was like a retroactive one. But we kept in touch with her, and 2 years later, when Red Rocket became real, I said, Strawberry has to be played by Susie. We reached out to her, and she said, I've been waiting for your call for 2 years, man. I almost gave up. But she's a miracle for us. I mean, she came and not only gave an incredible performance, but it's because of her that the NSYNC song's in the film, because we realized that she was an incredible musician and could sing, and she taught piano, and so we wanted to highlight her talent, and ended up eventually getting to NSYNC and, choosing a song that contextually fit with the film, but one that she could also perform and wanted to perform. And so I owe her so much.
You mentioned the date when you were driving through the refineries, which was during COVID. I read this story that I'd love for you to tell the audience, that you were working on another project, and then you pivoted and ended up with this project. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, of course. Yeah, I was working on a film for a few years after Florida Project that I became quite, passionate about. It was just something that couldn't be shot during the pandemic. It's a much bigger film. It's a film about drug user activism in Vancouver. So it's a film. Think Milk. You're asking hundreds of people to it's about activism, so I needed protesters on the street, something that just can't be done during this time. It's going to have to wait. So it was really, we realized that this was this movie that we were entrenched. We were living in Vancouver. This was something we were very, and Willem Dafoe was set up to be the lead and spending time up there and everything. And then COVID killed it. The borders closed. We just happened to be in LA when the borders closed, thankfully. And so we were just sitting around our apartment in late January, I guess February of 2020, mourning the sort of temporary death of that project. And And that's when my producer, Alex Sachs, reached out to me and said, I think I can find you a little bit of money to make something if you have anything. And I said, I have this idea, Red Rocket, that's been sitting on the back burner forever, and it's small enough where we can do it safely. And so we moved ahead and did it for a quarter of the budget of Florida Project, by the way. That didn't feel good. But, in hindsight, I think all the limitations imposed upon us by that smaller budget and COVID led to so much happy accidents and serendipity that we just would never have dreamed of. So.
Yeah, I mentioned to the audience when I introduced the film, and I know that you like to leave people to interpret things. I mentioned that it takes place during 2016. Can you tell us, as much as you like, the importance of switching it to 2016?
Sure, it was, I don't want to go too far because obviously I do want, the audience to interpret, but it's about complementing themes, I think, as I mentioned before, just the town itself or the area location complementing the theme. But in this case, we were also tackling the theme of division and the great divide that we have in this country right now, and that doesn't seem to be changing. And I see that time as a time, at least for me, when we became overtly political. Like everything became politicized because people were tuning into the coverage on that election the way, for me, in a way that I hadn't seen before. There was, because of the presence of a reality film star as one of the candidates, suddenly we were looking at it like a reality television show and absorbing it that way and not really tuning in to hear about the proposal for policies from the candidates. We were tuning in, or at least some of us were tuning in for the drama and the twists and turns and the comedy. And so I think the divide in my eyes started to grow at that time. And I wanted to use that time because it's a little bit like, this is my indictment on politics in general. Mm-hmm. And so just using the backdrop to complement the themes. And
tell us about Mikey and creating that character. I love the term that his wife calls him, suitcase pimp.
Yeah, that's an actual slang term applied to this archetype that we found in the adult film world. My co-screenwriter and I were doing research for a film called Starlet that we made before Tangerine. This was 10 years ago. And getting to know people in the adult film world and hanging out on sets, we realized that there was this archetype. We met a handful of Mikey Sabers and realized that there was a similar way of thinking, similar character traits, and then understanding that there was this term that you can look it up on urbandictionary.com. It's a term applied to the male talent in the adult film world that live off of the female talent, that exploit and live off of the female talent in the adult film world. And so I was fascinated. I was actually very their psyche. I had never seen this before displayed and portrayed in film and TV, and I wanted to tackle it as a character study because, I'll tell you why briefly. When I was hanging out with these men and getting to know them, I was actually hearing stuff. They were telling me stories like a lot of the Mikey Saber rants that you hear in the movie, and I was laughing because on the surface, these guys are, because they need to win you over in order to use you. They're charming and appealing on the surface. They're entertaining. A lot of them are actually very funny, like stand-up comedy funny. And I was standing around with these guys and laughing and enjoying myself, and then driving home at the end of the night saying, why was I laughing? Those are some really horrible stories, and they've had incredible negative effects on other people. They're like toxic to everyone they're around, and they're unaware of it, and they're very narcissistic, and they're completely unaware of the negative effects they have on other people. And I felt I was of two minds with these guys, because if I felt in a weird way I was participating along with their attitude and what they were doing, putting out into the world, and yet at the same time, I was completely repulsed. You know, so I was thinking, if I can put the audience in the same mindset that I was in when hanging out with them, even if it's in an uncomfortable place, it would be quite a challenge for me. And to have the audience, you know, rooting and then suddenly being like, why the hell would I root for this guy? And then rooting it and back and forth, almost like a roller coaster. That's what we were going for. Who knows if I achieved that, but that's
You
what
absolutely did, and they agree.
All right, okay, cool.
You know, I've seen it a few times now, and you walk a tightrope, and with this character. You just mentioned the fact that he's despicable, but we actually engage throughout the entire film in his journey. Was there a concern on your behalf as you were modulating the film and the performance as well, that, you know, making likable? I know that humor works in your favor as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at all stages we were thinking about it, and it felt like a balancing act. I'm the editor of my own films, so that's where it was, I think, ultimately found in the edit. Yes, and it was discussed. I discussed it a lot with my cast, my entire cast. And also Simon understood this character. I think from day one he was getting it. He read what I had given him. We discussed the basic surface characteristics at first, and then he watched some video of some of the interviews I had done of these guys, and he was like, I don't want to do an impersonation. Just show me. I got it, though. I think I got it. And I'm like, really? Do you want to meet any of them in person? He's like, no. He's like, I've been in Hollywood for the last 2.5 decades. I know plenty of narcissistic, sociopathic assholes I can pull from. So I'm like, okay. And obviously, it was incredible at that balance as well. It's like his instincts were dead on.
You also do a great balance between comedy and pathos in the storyline. Sometimes within a dime, it switches from highly comedic to how, you know, tell us about, you know, finding that balance.
Thank you. I to tell you the truth, it's kind of like it's one line at a time, one shot at a time. It's hard to say exactly where it's just, but it is deliberate, that tackling of that balance, because that's how I see life. You know, life is a combo of comedy and pathos at all times. Even when even if you're in dark times, you're using comedy humor to cope. You know, and so. I can't tell you specifically how, but it's a one step at a time sort of thing. Yeah.
And tell us about casting Simon, who's remarkable in this.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. He's amazing, and I feel it's a miracle that this all worked out, because I can't see any other person playing Mikey now. It's like I just had my eyes on him for a long time. We're about the same age. I remember when he hit MTV. He was like the face of MTV Raps back in the mid-'90s. And then I saw him resurface with Scary Movie. And him constantly, it's funny because everyone asks me, is Simon anything like Mikey? And no, most definitely not. But there's one character trait that I see in both Simon and Mikey, and that's this survival mode. Meaning survivor. He's a survivor. I think the industry unfairly has never taken him 100% seriously like they should. They never gave him meaty, dramatic roles, and I was always wondering why not. You know, but watching his career, he never gave up. He just kept. He would gravitate towards the next platform and fully embrace it. I remember when Vine rolled around and YouTube, he had a presence on there. And that's, again, when he resurfaced in my life. And I was like, this guy is continuously entertaining me. And I can tell, even in these 6-second Vine videos, Vine is this app that is no longer around, but it's like a TikTok thing where you can put 6 seconds of video out there. And even those 6 seconds, I was laughing and knowing that, seeing that he was basically, you know, he understood dramatic delivery and everything like that. So when we first broke Red Rocket, which was right after Florida Project, where we just figured out beginning, middle, and end, before moving on to this Vancouver project, we actually did flirt with the idea of making Red Rocket after Florida. I remember texting one of my producers one of his Vine videos and saying, if we make Red Rocket, it's going to be this guy. So he's been in my head for a while with this character, but yeah, so.
And the role, the two of you developed it as the filming took place, or it was already sealed?
There was a lot of that on I mean, almost all of the Mikey rants. No, it was fleshed out. Of course, all great actors elevate what you have on the page. And I encourage improvisation. And so when you break it down at the very end, it's probably like an 80-20 split. Like 80% of the dialogue came from the page, 20% came from their amazing improvisation. And they were all skilled at comedic improvisation. Even like the first timers, they were incredible. But Simon was always open for alt takes and trying something different there on the day, and so were the other cast members. So they were all like having fun. We were a little tiny. We were, because of COVID, and we had our COVID compliance rules dictated by the DGA, we had to be a tiny little pod, essentially, not really, kind of isolated. So we had a 10-person crew and like 5 extra cast members who were sometimes there and sometimes not. So the total would be 15 at most. And we were like an intimate like family, just with one goal in mind. So it was actually really, in a way, for me, very liberating as an artist and very freeing. And actually, to tell you the truth, I don't know if I can make that a Vancouver film right now because of COVID. So I may want to make another small film like this. I found it very freeing.
Oh, it does not look small. Being in that refinery town, while shooting, did you have any restrictions?
No. We thought we would. We were actually very worried about that. Besides COVID, that was the number one concern. And we reached out to the local police department to inform them that we were there and wanted to shoot. But I think just being a crazy time with COVID, we never really heard back. And we heard back, but meetings weren't ever set up. And we just said, we're just going to go and shoot. And one night we were shooting the naked run. We were shooting the naked run without a permit, and suddenly the night sky lit up red and blue, and there were cop cars coming from every direction. And we were just like, Simon, pull up your pants right now. Like he was in the back seat. They surrounded us, and I got out, and I was like, we're that independent film crew. We reached out to the department about this. We're those guys. And they said, okay, whatever. Do whatever you want. And then we realized at that moment what their number one concern is potential terrorism around the refineries. That's all they truly care about. So
not about Simon running
not a
naked.
naked grown man running around. No.
I love your films because you refuse to do sets. You shoot on location. Tell us about finding Donut Hole.
Oh yeah, well, Donut Hole is a geographical cheat. If you know that area, it's actually the big geographical cheat in the film, which I hate doing, but sometimes it's necessary. It's about an hour north in a city called Groves, outside of Port Arthur, Texas. And we were up there. That's where I actually found Brittany and Ethan, Lonnie and June. But Alex Coco and I just happened to be driving past Donut Hole, and we slammed on the brakes going, oh my God, like, is this real? Is this happening right now? This is like a gift from the film gods, like the proximity to the refineries, the colors, the parking lot, the possible sexual connotation or whatever you can think of when it comes to donuts. And then, of course, the sort of the wink back to my earlier film, Tangerine, which also featured a donut shop. So we even had, Shi Ching Zhou, who's one of the producers on the film, sort of reprise her role as Miss Fan. Yeah, so, yeah.
Again, no interpretation, but this is I think the second ending that you have this sort of Technicolor fantasy sequence. What can you tell us without
Yeah.
divulging too much?
Yeah, I have obviously my own personal thoughts on. I know in my head what happens, but again, I love films that allow the audience to sort of write their own endings, and also the literal ending of this story, like the literal ending of the Florida Project. In my eyes, it's just a little boring. It's like, we know what's happening. Like, do we have to really see it literally? Instead, and this came during production, actually. We had a pretty literal ending written on the page. But when I was there and having already shot about a week and a half or something with already being in the film and knowing how the style that we had set up and realizing that something that I was talking about the balance here, I had to, at some point, lean into the male gaze. I realized that, especially in this day and age, people don't want to see that anymore. But for me, in order to be honest, to get into Mikey's psyche, there are a few scenes in the film where I lean into it. And I thought, I think we're going to go out being in his head. We have to be in his head. And so, I'm just going to leave it there. But the decision was to take it to that place. Probably only about a few days before we shot it. Yeah. Wow. And it was Susie's first scene that she had to shoot. That's the first shot. Her in that doorway. Yeah.
It's crazy. And I love the in-sync plane in reverse.
Thank you.
At the end. That's terrific. Bree Elrod, who plays the wife, she's a theater actress from New York City. Tell us about casting her and working with her.
Well, she came to us through Samantha Kwan. Sam went to school with her at NYU and said, "She's my favorite actor. You have to meet this person." And I said, "I trust you, but can we have her? Can she do a self-tape for us?" She sent us a self-tape based on another play. I forgot what play. Sam? I don't know. Okay, but we gave her sides that was, similar to like a Lexi scene, and she just nailed it. And so I said, okay, well, we don't have to worry about Lexi. She's hired. We're casting Bree. But Bree then, oh my God, just being on set and seeing how incredible she is of an actor. Her instincts are dead on. She was blowing me away with every scene, giving me incredible alts and stuff on everything, where I could rely on her. She was like my anchor. And so for a scene like the sabotage scene at the end in the room, where Simon has his own thing that he has to do. So there wasn't much direction there. He already knew what he was doing. The rest of the room, all first-timers. So I just leaned into Bree. I said, "Bree, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to rely on you here. You're my wall of sound because I'm not scoring this scene." So if you watch that scene again, it's like Bree is eating up all the background audio, and she just gave me 20 to 30 minutes of screaming, singing, swearing. It's pretty incredible. I want to almost have that as a reel special feature on a Blu-ray or something.
And then, how does it work when you have, first-time actors that you just, bring from the porta potty? You just hand them the script and say, just be yourself, or?
Everybody is different. Everybody's an individual. Everybody has their own levels of comfort and their own, natural, born talent. So you have to deal with everyone individually. Thank God I have my wife, Samantha, who's also the acting coach on the last two films. So for Florida Project, she came on essentially to coach the children. And then I said, "Sam, I'm casting the two moms with first timers. I'm going to need your help there too." And then it became a relationship where we're starting to Samantha's able to work with them a lot, putting their minds at ease, workshopping, getting them to rehearse the scenes if they want to, maybe not too much rehearsal, because a lot of the times I do want them to have that spontaneity and willingness to improvise on set. So we don't want to over rehearse. But Sam is wonderful with all the first timers, and for me, I've just been incredibly lucky to have found first timers with this level of skill. So I do want to say, because I know sometimes, Santa Barbara, there might be industry in the room. Brittany Rodriguez, who plays June, and Ethan Darbone, who plays Lonnie, are ready to go. They're when you see first timers who have that level of skill, and on set, they are watching the experienced actors. I could see Brittany watching Simon to understand things, she was doing the repetition of action in each take to help the editor. Like, that's something you learn in an acting class. She was picking that up from the third or fourth take. I love those two, and they are ready to go. I could see them on the set of a Hollywood film tomorrow and blending in 100%. So it really comes down to the individual, yeah.
I mentioned outside that I grew up watching 1970s Italian exploitation films, and you pay homage, or you were influenced with this film. I even noticed the zooms on Bree in the last scene when she's calling him the pimp, suitcase pimp. You zero in, zoom in. Tell us about that influence.
Sure. Besides, Sugarland Express and Vilmos Zsigmond being an influence, I also was for the last few, maybe I don't know, I've become. I watch everything. I'm a cinephile, but for the last maybe decade, I've been really focusing on Italian cinema, especially the genre films of the early 70s, because I'm drawn to them because I actually think they were quite sophisticated in craft. And then on top of that, their approach to this sort of subject matter was very interesting because, like I talked about the roller coaster earlier, they would have a roller coaster in terms of their ethics with these films. They're almost like a moral roller coaster in terms of having the audience feel different things at different times. And so and their approach to sex in general, finding the humor in it. I just find very inspiring. So yeah, films like from directors like Fernando De Leo, Dino Risi, even Lena Woltmuller, who I think isn't really normally considered in the Italian sex comedy genre, but is. I consider her to be a part of it. So yeah.
Well, Sean, you're one of the directors I look forward to the most. Your next work. You're so exciting, and what you're doing with film is just terrific. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.